If you have ever believed that evil announces itself with chaos, with screaming, with flashing lights, and obvious danger, let this story correct you. Because sometimes the most horrifying thing you will ever witness begins as something painfully ordinary. A routine traffic stop, a quick conversation, a polite request for identification, a moment so normal that your brain relaxes, your guard drops, and you assume you already know how the next few minutes will end. But what if the end is not a citation, not a warning, not a tow? What if the end is a smell that does not belong in the living world? What if the end is the moment an officer steps back? Not because he is afraid of the driver, but because his body understands something his mind has not accepted yet. What if the end is the kind of discovery that makes grown professionals go silent, shake, and struggle to breathe because their instincts are screaming that what they are looking at should not exist? Stay with me until the end of this story, because it is not just about what police found in the trunk. It is about the invisible chain of failures that allowed it to be there. It is about how a lie can live long enough to rot into reality. It is about how a child can disappear without anyone filing a missing person report, without a single alarm going off, without the world noticing an absence that should have shattered everything. And if you are thinking, how is that possible? That is exactly why you should keep watching. Because the answer is not a simple monster in a simple story. The answer is a system that can be looked at and still not seen. A family that can be present and still absent. A person who can speak and still hide the truth behind every word. This is true life tales, and this story is based on official records, documented statements, and the kind of footage that does not feel real until you realize it is. It is late at night in Essex, Maryland. The hour is past 11. The roads are quieter, the air heavier, and the kind of small mistakes drivers make become easier for officers to spot. A vehicle is moving too fast, not racing like in the movies, just fast enough to give an officer a reason to pull it over, just fast enough to turn an ordinary night into something no one will forget. An officer approaches. The driver is a woman in her early 30s. Her name is Nicole. In the passenger seat is another woman, a friend she calls BB. The conversation starts the way these conversations always start. License, registration, simple questions, polite tone. Nicole hands over a state identification card, not a driver license. That is the first crack in the normal surface. The officer runs the information and finds something else. The vehicle does not check out. The registration does not exist. The tags do not belong. They are not real. Now the stop is no longer just about speed. Now it is about a vehicle that should not be on the road. A car that cannot legally stay in Nicole's control tonight. The officer tells her what is going to happen. The car will be towed. Procedures begin, and this is important because procedures are what make law enforcement look calm from the outside. Procedures keep people safe, keep evidence intact, and keep situations from turning unpredictable. Nicole and BB step out. Nicole moves toward the rear of the car. She opens the trunk. From a distance, it looks like clutter. Bags, layers, a trunk packed tight, like a person living out of their vehicle, stacking everything they own into the only space they can control. It looks like hardship. It looks like survival. Nicole starts talking, her words tumbling out fast and emotionally. She shares that she's been living in her car and mentions her kids. She sounds like someone drowning and trying to grab any rope in reach. The officer keeps his tone professional. He explains paperwork. He explains a court date. He explains consequences if she does not follow through. And then Nicole says something that should have made every hair on the back of a neck stand up. She says this is her last night. She says that tomorrow they will see her on the news. At the time, it sounds like drama, like exaggeration, like a person in crisis saying whatever comes out. But later, those words will feel like a prophecy, or a confession, or both. The officer does not know it yet, but he is standing at the edge of a story that has already been dead for months. A tow truck is called Standard. Nicole sits on the sidewalk, calling someone to pick her up. The officer explains something called an inventory search. This matters for towing. Police document what is inside a vehicle before it leaves, so no one can later claim something was stolen. Nicole reacts as if the inventory search is an invasion. Her life is in that car, she says. Her belongings, her last pieces of stability. She becomes emotional, then frantic. She starts talking about inspiration, about people telling her to hold on, about light at the end of the tunnel. And she keeps asking where the light is now. If you have ever watched someone unravel in real time, you know the feeling. Your empathy pulls one way, your suspicion pulls another. And the truth is, moments like this are why officers train themselves to focus, because emotion can distract you from danger. And sometimes, emotion can also be a mask. Back up, arrives. Another officer walks up. The first officer pulls him aside quietly, away from Nicole and Bibi. His voice lowers. He says something is wrong. Not drugs, not weapons. Something else. He asks his colleague to walk near the car and smell the air. There are moments in footage like this where you can see the exact second the atmosphere changes. It is subtle. A face tightens, a posture stiffens. A person becomes more alert without fully understanding why. The colleague approaches the trunk. He smells it. He pauses. It smells like something dead. At first, Nicole tries to control the narrative. She says it is dirty blankets, dirty clothes, things sitting in the trunk for months. She speaks quickly, as if speed can outrun suspicion. The officer's voice changes. It becomes firmer. He says it does not smell like dirty clothes. Nicole insists. She starts opening bags. She pulls at layers. She claims she is trying to show them. The officers are watching not just her hands, but her face, because fear looks different when it is guilt. The smell does not fade. It grows stronger as they peel back layers. Trash bags. Plastic. More plastic. The kind of excessive wrapping that makes no sense for laundry. The kind of wrapping that suggests someone wants to keep something contained. Nicole says there are bugs. She says it has been sitting there. She says she does not know what it is. She keeps talking, but her words do not settle anything. They create a thick fog of explanation that never answers the obvious question. What is inside? Officers do not rush. They cannot. The situation is unstable. A car is about to be towed. Two women are standing nearby. One of them is emotionally volatile, and now there is a smell that suggests a possible crime scene. An officer begins to cut through the layers carefully. A knife appears, not as a weapon, but as a tool. The blade slices plastic. The sound is small, but in that moment, it feels loud, because each cut is another step toward a truth no one wants to see. More layers come off. Then a black suitcase appears. A suitcase in a trunk is not unusual, but a suitcase wrapped and buried like this is different. It is the kind of detail that makes experienced people stop and reassess everything they thought they were dealing with. Nicole keeps trying to control the moment. She says it is blank. She says she can explain. She keeps asking for help cutting. She keeps insisting she does not know what is inside. But the officers do not match her tone. Their voices are sharp. Now, cautious, commanding. They tell her to open it all the way. They tell her to pull it out. They tell her to stop playing. This is the point where the footage stops feeling like policing and starts feeling like something else. Like a line has been crossed. Like everyone present is stepping into a room they cannot leave unchanged. The suitcase opens enough for the officers to see what the smell was guarding. Their reactions are immediate. Not theatrical, not performative. Pure human shock. Day-step bike. They shout commands. They draw control around the scene. Nicole is ordered to the ground, hands behind her back. No more talking. No more explanations. No more manipulation of the moment. Baby reacts to, but in a different way. Confused. Pleading. Saying she has nothing to do with it. begging officers not to arrest her. The officers do not know what Bibi knows yet. They only know what they are looking at. And what they are looking at is beyond routine. The scene shifts from confusion to containment. The officers are visibly shaken. You can hear it in their breathing, in the way they speak to each other. One tells another to calm down, to focus. Masks, gloves. Everyone needs protection because the smell is not just disgusting. It is evidence of death, and death is a biohazard. Then someone says a word that hits like a hammer, a child. And that is the moment everything collapses into something much darker. Because this is not a bag of drugs, not a weapon, not stolen property, not a human adult. This is a small body, hidden in layers, concealed in a suitcase, stored in a trunk like a secret someone believed could be carried forever. Officers struggle with what they are seeing. Some cannot look. Some force themselves to verify. They talk in fragments, trying to hold their minds together. One of them mentions his own child's birthday, and you can hear the way that personal connection turns shock into rage. Because a discovery like this does not stay professional. It becomes personal, whether you want it or not. More officers arrive. They see the faces of the first responders and instantly understand something terrible happened, even before they are told. Nicole keeps trying to speak. Bibi keeps demanding answers. The officers keep ordering silence because this is no longer a conversation. It is a crime scene. The tow truck is dismissed. This car is not going anywhere. Not until homicide detectives arrive. Not until the evidence is documented. Not until the truth is pulled out of every layer. And here is the most important detail. This was only the beginning. Because what police found in the suitcase was not the end of the story. It was the opening of a larger nightmare that had been traveling on public roads for months, while the world passed by in other lanes, unaware. In the next part, we go deeper into what happened after the arrest, what officers discovered when they looked beyond the first horrific find, and the question that should haunt every adult who hears this. How does a child end up like this? And how does no one notice they are gone? When a discovery like this happens in public, on the side of a road, the scene becomes a strange kind of theater. Cars pass by. People stare. A night that belonged to ordinary strangers suddenly belongs to investigators, to evidence, to the weight of something irreversible. Nicole and Bibi are taken into custody, but even as the cuffs click into place, the officers are not celebrating an arrest. They are trying to survive an image they cannot unsee. At the scene, they talk to each other in short bursts, as if longer sentences might break them. They argue about whether to look again. They debate what they think they saw, because the mind does that in shock. It tries to create doubt as a defense. Maybe it is not what it looks like. Maybe it is something else. Maybe it is a mistake. But the smell does not allow denial. The smell is the truth leaking into the air. Officers decide they have to verify, not because they want to, because they must. Evidence requires confirmation. Homicide requires certainty, and the only way to move forward is to face the thing that makes their stomachs twist. They lift coverings carefully. They use gloves. They lean in, then step back. They describe what they see in practical language, trying to keep emotion contained. But emotion is all over their voices. A little girl. The size is wrong in the worst way. Small, curled, wrapped. Like someone tried to reduce a life to an object that could fit in a trunk. One officer says the age out loud as a way to force his brain to accept it. Another responds with certainty. They do not want to be right, but they are. A child is dead, and the body has been there long enough for nature to begin its relentless work. At this point, any viewer might assume this is the entire story. A traffic stop reveals a body, the suspect is arrested, the investigation begins. But reality is rarely that simple, especially not in cases like this, because investigators do not just stop at the first obvious horror. They inventory everything. They document the entire trunk. They go through the layers of bags, because procedure demands it. And procedure, in this case, will uncover a second nightmare buried beneath the first. Nicole and BB are transported to the station. The footage changes location, but the tension remains. In separate rooms, the two women react very differently. Nicole appears to understand the gravity of what just happened. She talks to herself. She spirals, she swings between guilt, fear, and self-justification. She repeats phrases. She calls herself stupid. She speaks about punishment as if she believes something has been chasing her and finally caught up. BB, on the other hand, appears confused, agitated, and desperate for answers. She demands to know why she is detained. She asks repeatedly if she killed someone. The officer with her keeps his tone controlled. He explains what he can. He explains what he cannot. He tells her, again and again, that she is in custody and must wait. BB requests to go to the hospital, claiming she does not feel well. The officer asks, "What is wrong?" BB says her knee hurts. The officer tries to assess whether she is truly in distress or trying to manipulate the situation. He tells her if she goes, she will be shackled. BB quickly changes her mind. In those exchanges, something becomes clear. BB does not appear to understand what is happening. Her confusion feels genuine, not calculated. Later, investigators will treat her differently. But at this stage, everyone is still operating in the shadow of the discovery. Nicole, meanwhile, is left alone with her thoughts. And this is where the story takes a darker turn, because the smell clings to her. Officers mention it. They try to neutralize it. They use spray. They bring in equipment to scrub the air. The odor is not just unpleasant. It is a physical reminder of what is tied to her, whether by guilt or by proximity. Eventually, detectives arrive and begin interviewing Nicole more formally. She offers a story at first that feels like a distraction. She claims she came to Essex to meet a man, implying sex work. She frames herself as someone living on the edge, drifting between hotels and the car. She says she knew there was a smell, but assumed it was something small, something explainable, something like a dead animal. Detectives challenged her. They ask how she tried to remove the odor. She describes power washing the car. She describes cleaning them. She describes efforts that sound almost absurd next to what was found, because there is a difference between noticing a smell and believing it comes from a rat. Investigators observe BB as well and conclude something significant. She appears mentally challenged and likely unaware of what was inside the trunk. They begin contacting her family, but Nicole is not going to be released into a simpler narrative, because during the continued inventory of the trunk and her belongings, investigators find something else. Another child. This second discovery does not happen dramatically on camera the way I did. It happens the way many terrible truths are uncovered. Through sorting, through checking, through a professional refusing to assume there is only one horror. Inside another container, buried under belongings, is the aged remains of a small boy. Now, the case expands from unimaginable to almost incomprehensible. Two children, two bodies, both concealed in layers of trash bags, blankets, and storage containers. And now the questions multiply. Who are they? How long have they been there? Why were they never reported missing? How does a person carry this through daily life? Nicole's own words return like an echo. Months and months and months. Words said at the roadside that felt like chaotic exaggeration now feel like a timeline. A confession hidden in plain sight. Detectives confront Nicole with the reality that this is not just one tragic incident. They need names. They need identities. They need connections. This is when the story reveals an even more disturbing detail. Nicole recognizes them, not as strangers, not as unknown victims, as family. The children are her niece and nephew. The girl is Joshin. The boy is Larry. And this is where the case shifts from a shocking roadside discovery into a deep tragedy about neglect, abuse, and the kind of failure that does not happen in a single night. Because when investigators learn who these children are, they uncover something that is almost as horrifying as the bodies themselves. Neither child was enrolled in school. Neither child had been seen by doctors in that region. Neither child had been reported missing. No Amber Alert. No frantic family search. No urgent public plea. Nothing. 2 children vanished into a private nightmare, and the world did not notice. In the next part, we go into the timeline, the family dynamics, the texts, the lies, and the slow unraveling of what Nicole claims happened. We examine how someone can keep a child's death hidden for more than a year, while still speaking to family members as if everything is normal. And we confront the question that sits beneath every detail. Was it an accident? Or was it a pattern that finally became fatal? Once detectives know the children are related to Nicole, the interview becomes less about what police found and more about what Nicole did while carrying that truth. Day after day, Nicole tells detectives that the children were left in her care by her sister. The explanation, she says, was that the sister could not care for them at the time. This is the first point where people watching might search for something to hold on to. Maybe Nicole was maybe she was struggling. Maybe she never asked for this responsibility. But even if that is true, none of it explains what happened next. Detectives ask basic questions. Names, dates, details. Any caretaker should know. Nicole cannot spell the girl's name. Nicole cannot recall birthdays. These are not small gaps. They are the kind of gaps that reveal distance, detachment, and neglect. They reveal that these children were not anchored in her care as people, but floating in her life as burdens. Investigators also begin building a timeline. They examine messages, tape-pull data. They compare Nicole's claims to what her family says. Nicole tries to frame herself as the responsible one. She speaks about yelling at the children's mother in the past, about feeding and washing them, about being the one who tried. She paints herself as a reluctant hero, stuck with abandoned kids while others failed them. Detectives do not accept that narrative easily. They have evidence that the sister checked in frequently. They have messages showing money sent, requests to see the children, and attempts to arrange visits. They have proof that Nicole blocked access, that she controlled contact, that she maintained separation. Nicole's version of reality depends on one central idea: that she was alone, that no one helped, that no one cared. But evidence suggests the opposite. Then Nicole begins to describe what happened to Joshin. She calls it an accident. Detectives press her. Accidents are specific. They have causes. They have moments. They have decisions afterward that define whether a person seeks help or hides. Nicole admits she hit the child. She describes disciplining her for stealing food, for getting into the refrigerator, for repeated behavior that frustrated her. She describes herself as overwhelmed, stressed, angry at life, resentful toward family, resentful toward the situation. The language matters here, because it is not just about a single moment. It is about a state of mind. Nicole admits she struck the girl, and the girl became unresponsive. Nicole describes the child falling and hitting her head on a hard floor. Detectives ask what Nicole did next. This is one of the most chilling sections of the entire case, because it reveals the moment where a person chooses between emergency help and concealment. Nicole says she tried to revive her. She says she pressed hard on the child's chest. She says she laid in bed with her. She says she stayed in the room. Then she describes what she did when she realized the child was not coming back. She put the child in a suitcase. She kept her. Think about what that means. Not only the act itself, but the time afterward, the days that follow. The nights when a suitcase is in the same space as you. The decisions you make about where to go, where to sleep, what to say when someone asks about the child. Investigators believe Joshin died around May of a previous year, more than a year before the traffic stop. During that time, Nicole continued texting her sister as though Joshin was alive. The sister thanked Nicole for taking care of them. Nicole received money. Nicole traveled from hotel to hotel, and the child remained hidden. This is where viewers often ask, how does a person live like that? The answer is not comfortable. Some people adapt to horror the way others adapt to routine. They compartmentalize, they bury the reality under survival, under addiction, under denial, under the belief that if they do not name it, it is not real. But reality does not stop. Decomposition does not stop. The smell becomes a part of the environment, the way mold becomes part of a wall when ignored long enough. And Nicole's own words reveal that she knew there was a smell. She cleaned. She washed. She used odor control. The smell was the truth, insisting on being acknowledged. The medical examiner later finds bruising on the child's body, but due to the advanced state of decay, an exact cause of death is difficult to determine. Still, the death is ruled a homicide because the pattern points to abuse and neglect. Then detectives turn to Larry. Nicole refers to him with a nickname. She says he was attached to her, that he did not want to go anywhere else. She portrays him as a child who clung to her, as if that connection proves she cared. But connection is not protection. Detectives ask what happened. Nicole claims she does not know. She describes playing. Then suddenly, blood. She describes noticing blood on his clothes. Around the inside of his thigh, she suggests an injury, an artery, something accidental. Detectives are not satisfied. They ask what caused the injury. Nicole admits she may have swung at him for playing with something. She cannot name the object. She cannot provide clarity. The story slips, reshapes, and becomes vague, but she remembers what happened after. She says he became drowsy. She says he asked to be laid down. She describes laying him in the back seat of the car. She describes turning away to smoke, then turning back, then calling his name, then realizing he was gone. This is a critical point, because it reveals another decision, another moment where a caretaker faces a medical emergency and chooses not to seek help. Later, the boy's body is found still in pajamas. Bruises are present. Internal bleeding suggests trauma, but again, decomposition makes the exact cause hard to pinpoint. The pattern remains unmistakable. Neglect, physical harm, failure to seek medical care, failure to report death, concealment. Investigators discovered that neither child had been seen by a doctor in the area, neither was enrolled in school, neither was reported missing. And another detail emerges that makes the case even more tragic. The children were unusually small for their ages. Their weights indicate malnourishment over time. Medical experts state that such low weights would require months of inadequate nutrition. Nicole denies starving them. But reality is not an argument. Reality is measurement. At this point, the story is no longer about a trunk. It is about how two children can disappear inside a family system and remain invisible. Nicole's mother later pleads with officials to protect another grandchild. Fundraisers appear, accusations fly. Everyone points fingers. Social services is criticized. Family members blame each other, and all of it raises the same haunting question. Where was everyone before the traffic stop? In the next part, we return to the night of the stop and follow the emotional fallout among officers and investigators. We examine why this case hit responders so hard, and how the discovery of a second child reshaped the entire investigation into something even more devastating. And we confront the truth that should linger in your mind. This did not begin at the roadside. It began in the months where no one intervened. There is a moment in cases like this where the timeline stops being just dates and becomes something heavier, a lived reality, a stretch of time where horror was present, hidden, traveling through ordinary spaces, because while these children were concealed, life continued around them. Traffic flowed, people checked into hotels. Gas stations stayed open, streets were lit. Conversations happened. Nicole spoke to friends, to family, to strangers, while death sat behind her in the trunk. When officers at the scene realized they were dealing with a child, their reactions were not exaggerated. They were human. The kind of reaction you see when someone's professional identity collides with personal reality. One officer tried to calm another, telling him to focus, to breathe, to keep working. Because even in shock, the job continues. The scene must be secured. The evidence must be protected. The suspects must be controlled. But you can hear it in the voices. They were not okay. Someone mentions a child's birthday, not as small talk, but as a mental shockwave. Because when you see a child's body, you do not just see the victim. You see your own child, your niece, your nephew, the children you've passed at the grocery store. Your mind fills the empty space with the faces you love. That is why cases like this break people. Officers arriving later could tell something was wrong before they even looked. The expressions on the first responders told the story. The way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they kept people back, the way they masked up, gloved up, and treated the trunk like a biohazard. The tow truck driver was dismissed. This car was no longer a tow. It was evidence. Homicide would be called, warrants would be sought. Detectives would take over. Photographs would be taken. Documentation would be thorough, because in court, feelings do not matter. Only facts do. At the station, BB's confusion becomes a central point. Officers keep telling her to sit, to stop talking, to wait. She asks if she killed someone. She insists she is clean. She does not appear to grasp the situation. That becomes important later, because it suggests she may have been a passenger, not a partner. Investigators contact BB's mother. They arrange for her to be taken home. They recognize that keeping her in the system without understanding may be unjust. Nicole, however, has no such path out. When detectives confront her with a second child, the atmosphere shifts again. Because at that moment, any attempt to frame this as a single horrible secret collapses. Two bodies mean a story that extends beyond a single incident each man's time. It means sustained concealment. It means an ongoing choice. Nicole tries to return to her narrative. She speaks about depression, about wanting a mother, about family betrayal. She speaks about punishment and suffering as if she sees herself as a victim of life. This is not uncommon in interviews. People who have done terrible things often reach for explanations that place the center of the story on themselves. Their pain, their past, their hardships, their resentments. It is a way to dilute responsibility. But detectives do what detectives do. They pull the thread. They ask for specifics. They compare her story to evidence. They show her texts. They highlight contradictions. The more Nicole speaks, the clearer it becomes that she maintained a performance for her family. She responded as if the children were alive. She accepted money. She promised visits. She avoided direct confrontation. This is where the word disappearance takes on its true meaning. Those children did not disappear because no one loved them. They disappeared because love was not enough to trigger action. The sister was texting. The family was involved, but no one physically verified. No one demanded proof. No one called authorities. And social systems that are supposed to catch vulnerable children never engaged, because there was no official report, no school enrollment to reveal absence, no doctor visits to raise questions. This is the silent failure that makes the case so chilling. A child can vanish completely if they are not visible to institutions, if they are not in school. If they are not in healthcare, if no one reports them, then they are only protected by the conscience of the adult who holds them. And conscience, in this case, failed. Investigators later find the hotel room Nicole stayed in. Stuffed animals, decorative items that look like they might be memorial gestures, but no children's clothing. No toys that suggest active care, nothing that indicates two small lives were being nurtured. This contrast is haunting, because it suggests a person trying to create a symbol of care while reality was the opposite. The question becomes, how long were the bodies in the trunk? Evidence indicates Joshin had been deceased for more than a year. Larry for months. Imagine that timeline? Holidays, birthdays, passing, messages being sent, money being transferred, hotel rooms changed, the trunk closed again and again, and then a traffic stop. The smallest intervention, a speed limit, a routine procedure, and suddenly the hidden reality is exposed. This is why true crime is rarely about the dramatic. It is about the mundane that cracks open the hidden. A neighbor hearing something, a smell that cannot be ignored, a child's absence noticed by a teacher, a patrol officer stopping a car for speeding. Small moments that become the difference between silence and truth. In the final part, we hit the emotional peak of this case. not with flashy details, but by understanding the true impact of what's been uncovered. We'll look at the legal outcome and sentencing, and the question that lingers after justice is announced. Because when a court gives a number of years, it does not restore a single day to the children who were never seen. And that is the part that should stay with you long after the video ends. There is a moment after a case like this becomes public where people look for a clean ending. They want the comfort of a final line. Guilty sentenced, closed. They want to believe that justice is a door you can shut, a chapter you can finish, a horror you can leave behind once the court speaks. But some cases do not end that way. They continue in the lives of those who responded, those who should have intervened, those who must live with the knowledge of what they did not see. Because the true horror here is not only that 2 children died, it is that they died in a world where they were never truly visible. They were not in school. They were not in the system. They were not reported missing. No one was searching. In the official narrative, the case began when officers smelled something during a traffic stop, but in reality, the case began long before that. It began in the months of neglect. It began in the moments of discipline that turned into harm. It began in the decision not to call for help. It began in the choice to hide. When Nicole finally admitted what happened, she described frustration. She described life pressure. She described depression. She described being overwhelmed. She tried to place her actions inside a storm of hardship. Hardship is real. People struggle. People break. But hardship does not place a child in a suitcase. Hardship does not wrap a body in layers and carry it for months. Hardship does not erase a life and then text a family member as if nothing happened. That is not hardship, that is choice, and the system treats it as choice. Nicole was indicted on multiple counts, including severe child abuse resulting in death, neglect, failure to report, and unlawful disposal of book. The charges were extensive because the timeline was extensive, because the concealment was extensive, because the harm was not a single moment. It was a sustained pattern. Eventually, Nicole pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree child abuse resulting in death. In February of the following year, she was sentenced to life in prison with a large portion suspended, leaving a lengthy term to serve, followed by supervised probation if she is ever released. That is what the court can do. The court can name the crime. The court can assign punishment. The court can mark an ending for the legal process. But the court cannot answer the question that matters most. Where was the protection before it came to this? The children's mother had contact with Nicole. She texted. She sent money. She asked to see them. She wanted them to meet a new sibling. She attempted reconnection. So why did she not demand proof sooner? Why did she not involve authorities when access was blocked? Why did the wider family not intervene? Why did social services not detect absence? Why did no one report to children missing? The story suggests what many tragedies reveal. People often assume that if something were truly wrong, someone else would already be doing something. They assume schools will catch it, but the child is not enrolled. They assume doctors will notice, but the child is never taken. They assume neighbors will hear something, but the family keeps moving. They assume relatives will act, but relatives argue, delay, rationalize, and avoid. And in that space between assumption and action, children become invisible. This is the emotional climax of the story. Not because of shock, but because of what it reveals about reality. It reveals that the most vulnerable can disappear completely when they exist outside the lines of the system. And it reveals something else that should make every adult pause. Even after death, concealment can continue if no one demands the truth. Joshine was hidden for more than a year. Larry was hidden for months. And during that time, ordinary life continued. Cars passed the trunk. Hotel clerks checked Nicole in. Friends gave rides. People talked to her. No one knew until a patrol officer smelled something wrong and refused to ignore it. So here is the question I want to leave you with. How many stories never get that traffic stop? How many children live in silence because no one checks? No one insists, no one reports, no one verifies. If this message touched you, subscribe. Not for me, but for you. Because if this resonated, it means you are awake to something most people try not to see. And the more you understand how these cases happen, the more you understand what to notice in the real world. A child who is never seen, a caregiver who cannot answer basic questions, a home that feels too quiet, a pattern of excuses that never ends. These are not proof of guilt, but they are signals that demand attention, because attention is not just awareness. Attention is intervention. And intervention is the only thing that breaks silence before silence becomes tragedy. If you want to continue down this path of true stories, documented cases, and the uncomfortable truths hidden inside ordinary nights, watch the next video on this channel. Another case where a routine moment uncovered something no one wanted to find, because the difference between hidden and known is often a single person who refuses to look away.